So as I said, René Descartes is our most famous proponent of interactionism, also commonly called Cartesian dualism. Well, Descartes laid out two separate arguments to demonstrate that the mind and body are in fact two separate and distinct things. He was very interested in finding certainty. And to that end, he needed to be able to establish whether the mind and body were one or separate. His first argument was the conceivability argument. And the conceivability argument goes as such. Descartes can imagine existing without his body. Okay, Descartes could imagine existing with no body at all. He could imagine existing as simply a disembodied spirit or whatever you might call it. It is complete. He said, I can imagine my body no longer existing, and yet I continue to exist. As a result, he said, I must not have to have a body to exist. Okay, so let's take a moment to explain what happened between these two claims. When Descartes talks about imagining, I could imagine that I didn't exist, that I existed without a body, that I didn't exist with a body. I know that's a little more cumbersome. What that means is, I can tell myself a story where I continue to exist even though my body does not. Well, telling myself a story means that I can conceive of it. Okay? I can conceive of it. In philosophy, this is incredibly important. Because if we can conceive of something, it means that it is logically possible. Okay? If we can conceive of something, it's logically possible. When something is logically possible, we have to entertain how it fits into everything else we think of. Logically possible does not equal exists. Okay? Because there are a lot of things that are logically possible that don't actually exist. This isn't as strange as it sounds. Think about your family makeup. Okay, you've got a mom and a dad, and you might have siblings, okay? Let's say, for the sake of argument, just for the example, you have a brother and a sister, okay? So in your family, there are 3 children, and you have a brother and a sister. You can tell yourself a story, and my guess is when you were a kid you did. You can imagine not having that brother, right? You can imagine it just being your sister and you, or you can imagine it was just your brother and you, right? You can tell yourself a story where that sibling, pick one, brother or sister, never existed. Well, when you imagine that, you conceive of it, which means that logically it could have happened that you never had that sister. That doesn't mean that that's the way things are, right? Because in fact, you do have that sister. Your sister exists. So when we say something's logically possible, we say that it could have been the case, even though it may not actually be the case. Okay? It could have been the case that Mitt Romney won the presidential election in 2012. It could have been the case that You took this class at a whole different school. It could have been the case that you went to a different school. It could have been the case that you were never born because mom and dad never met, right? We tell ourselves stories about this. Now, a lot of people will say, well, what do we care? We can tell ourselves stories, but if it's not the way it is, what does it matter? It matters because we want even the things that are possible to be consistent with what we believe, okay? So even if it's the case that Descartes existed with a body, which it, I think, fairly certainly was, he could have not existed without a body, which means that he didn't have to have a body to exist. But when he considers existing without a mind, okay, when he considers his mind not existing and his continuing to exist, he can't imagine it. He can't imagine continuing to exist when he doesn't have those mental states, when he doesn't have a mind, when he doesn't have thoughts. And if he can't exist without a mind, okay, it's not logically possible for him to exist without a mind, okay? So in other words, he's saying this, ooh, that was messy. This is logically impossible. This is like a contradiction, okay? A logical impossibility. It's like saying that the ball is red all over and the ball is not red all over all at the same time. Well, that can't possibly happen. Contradictions can never be true. Something that is logically impossible could never be the case. And as a result, Descartes says, provided I'm thinking, I must exist. Okay? This is his famous cogito ergo, that's an R, sum. I think, therefore I am. I can't possibly imagine existing without a mind, so provided I am thinking, I exist. Does that make sense? Threw a lot of terms at you, a lot of stuff right there. Are you with me? Okay. Well, Descartes' first argument for the mind and body being separate stems from this notion that he can conceive of his existing without a body. Okay, this first idea here that he could exist without a body is a key component to this thought process. And there are some people that question whether that really could be the case. So there is an objection that maybe we cannot really imagine existing without having a body. There was a gentleman, a philosopher. There is a philosopher. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I'm almost certain he's still alive. His name is Ted Schick, and he charged us with this notion that, in fact, we cannot truly conceive of existing without a body. And he said that because in order to really imagine existing without a body, we have to take away everything the body gives us. The body gives us eyes for seeing, ears for hearing, nose for smelling, mouth for talking. If we take away all of those things with the body, we have no way of interacting with the external world. We have no way of interacting with the physical world. If I can't see, I can't find somebody I want to haunt or whatever, you know. We think of, we tell stories about ghosts existing. And ghost, there are plenty of movies and books and television shows and the whole nine yards about ghosts haunting people. Well, if a ghost is just a disembodied mind, how do they see who they're haunting? How do they hear what people are saying? Is Schick's point here. So this is from Ted Schick. How would we ever interact? How would we recognize anybody? How would we communicate with them? He says, when we really think about imagining existing without a body, it's not really in that completely, utterly disembodied state where there's only blackness, because we don't have eyes. And while we can continue to think of the things that were already in our mind, we can't gain new information. We can't look in on our loved ones. We can't haunt the people who irritated us as alive people. So what we get is Schick is challenging this idea that we can imagine existing without a body. Because if in imagining that you imagine sensory experiences coming from the physical senses, you're not truly imagining existing as a disembodied mind. And if that's the case, if this is not true, okay, I'm not writing. If this is not true, then that's not true. It doesn't affect the second two claims. It just means that I have to have a body to exist. I might have to have a mind to exist as well, but I also have to have the body. The point is that Descartes' attempt to demonstrate that these two things are separate fails. Does that make sense?